we have to do this in advance of the CBDC being rolled out, because if it's rolled out and we don't have alternate parallel currencies in operation and use, this will make it almost impossible to resist signing into the CBDC.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Libertarian Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for April 8th through April 15th, 2024, while supplies last. First, we feature 1 ounce 2024 American Silver Eagles at just $5.50 over spot. It's a limited supply, so there's a maximum of 1,500 ounces per order. Next, 1/10 ounce 2024 American Gold Eagles at just $51 over melt. It's also a limited supply, so a maximum of 150 per order. And finally, 90% constitutional silver pre-1965 mixed dimes and quarters at just $2.75 over spot. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. We're glad to have this returning guest. Michael Rectenwald is a candidate for the Libertarian nomination for President of the United States. He joins us this Tuesday, April 9th, 2024. Michael, thank you for coming back on Liberty and Finance.
Great to be here, Donovan. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We've talked with you several times in the past about your recently published books, about how people can do a great refusal of the plans that have been laid for us of the Great Reset that's been planned by the globalists, etc. You've talked about your desire to dismantle many of the three-letter agencies that plague our freedoms and are unconstitutional in many respects. We wanted to know if you could give us an update today on a movement that's of particular interest to our subscribers, and that's what I would call the sound money movement or constitutional money movement. Our audience is quite attuned to the pain that's been caused in people's lives from their earnings, their savings, and their retirements being taken away from them, basically stolen through currency debasement at the hands of our fiat currency, which is not what the Constitution calls for. And there are several states, about 14 of them, that are leading the charge of a sound money movement to establish state depositories, to establish state legal tender laws, to repeal state taxes on the sales of precious metals, to even outlaw the seizure of precious metals owned by their citizens of their states from the federal government or other outside entities. You are keeping track of a lot of issues that affect the good of the people and the good of the freedom of people as a libertarian yourself. Could you talk to us about this particular issue about sound money and what it means to you as a candidate?
Yeah, it's a big part of my campaign, my platform, and that is to say I'm very much in favor of, first of all, at the federal level, revoking the legal tender laws, because they keep us from using alternative currencies and force us into accepting only the fiat currency as the medium of exchange. This has to be challenged. We need to have a free market in currencies. And these state moves to secure the currencies and to secure value in currencies is a very good move, very good sound practice. It's in line with my own campaign platform of decentralization. Decentralization is the key to resisting tyranny. It is, I think, the only way to resist it, because we're dealing with a federal behemoth, the largest state in the history of the world. And it is using whatever coercive means it can, and then some, to force us into debt slavery using the fiat currency and the federal tax laws. So, I mean, all of this is great that these states are taking it upon themselves. The only thing I would say that I would try to amend there, if I had some input, would be that they not establish legal tender laws per se, but that they revoke the federal legal tender laws in their states and allow the use of parallel alternative currencies. And of course, gold is a significant, gold leafs would be a significant alternative. but also people should be allowed to use whatever currencies they deem acceptable in their particular networks, whatever that might be, whether that be gold or silver or Bitcoin or Monero or other means of currencies. Currency is really what people accept in a medium of exchange as representative of value. So I think that anything can be agreed upon. You don't want to use bananas, and I'm saying bananas because I'm looking at a new bunch of bananas on my shelf because they're perishable. You don't want to use bananas because they're perishable. So you want to use something that's durable, and that should be really up to the people. It should not be decided by the state, and I mean the federal government. It should not be decided by legislators. This should be allowed, period. We should have a free market in currencies.
I'm going to springboard off of your bananas comment. You might have made that just in jest, but I think it's actually very piercing to this topic. First of all, with the debts and deficits that our country's been running and the way that we've been cranking out a new $1 trillion in debt every 100 days for the last 3 cycles, many people have called our country a de facto banana republic, number one. Number two, you talked about the undesirability of, or the unsuitability of perishable assets as money, because one of the fundamental aspects of money is that it needs to be durable. And yet, if we look in, for example, China, where they have centralized control over people's digital accounts, they're talking about and implementing the social credit scores, which can include expiring currency. In other words, that the central bank can issue you central bank digital currency that expires, so you don't have the choice of saving it. It's going to perish. It's not it's perishable, and you've got to spend it or lose it, use it or lose it, and so it's forcing your hand and taking away your freedom. I guess those are just some of the ways that people are experiencing theft of their private property. Could you maybe talk to us about the importance of private property rights and why that's central to freedom? And as a libertarian candidate for president, what your approach is towards private property rights and protecting against government seizure?
Okay, first let me tail back a little bit to your comment about the CBDC. I think this is in China, this is already being put in place. They've had a pilot program and they're now rolling it out. In the United States, this is also a real serious prospect and threat. Likewise, we need to be ready in advance to be able to preclude the enrollment into the necessary enrollment into the CBDC by virtue of having in place and in use alternate parallel currencies. We have to do this in advance of the CBDC being rolled out, because if it's rolled out and we don't have alternate parallel currencies in operation and use, then this will make it almost impossible to resist signing into the CBDC. And as for property rights, I think that there are really only a few main principles of libertarianism. The first principle is that you have property in yourself. You own yourself. That, I believe, and this is just an aside, was vowed and vouchsafed to you by the Creator. And that is your property. And we were meant to be free beings. We were created to be free. So the first line of property is self-ownership. The second line of property, of course, is everything that you create. And, as Locke put it, whatever you mix your labor with becomes your property. So homesteading is a huge means by which we gain property. That has to be protected as a fundamental right. And every other right flows from property rights. Even the right of so-called free speech really follows from property rights. You have the ownership of yourself, therefore you should be able to use your body, including your tongue and your mind, to say what you deem you want to say. And it shouldn't be up to the state whether you can say it or not. So how do we protect that? We protect it by getting control of by decentralization, by getting control of the local governments, doing things like these 14 states are doing, getting protection through these local communities that's such that the federal government cannot infringe our property rights so easily, if at all. This is what we need to do. We need to be able to resist the imperatives of the central state and its intention, which I believe is really there, to strip us of our property. This is really one of the precepts of the Great Reset, which is being driven into legislation and fiat dictatorial policies in the Biden administration, EOs, executive orders. All of this is being dictated through the state now. So these NGOs and international intergovernmental organizations like the UN issued their Agenda 2030, and the Agenda 2030 items, its ethos and its very practice has been now incorporated by the federal government. And so we must find a way to resist the federal government's impositions of its dicta on us. And that's through localization, decentralization.
We're starting to see another form of pushback beyond monetary legal tender laws, and that is states starting to pass, well, also local jurisdictions as well, starting to pass bills that are turning into laws, saying that edicts or guidelines or enforcement of policies from bodies outside of their state will not be enforceable in the state, such as from the United Nations, from the World Health Organization, from the International Monetary Fund, etc. Can you talk to us about your position on whether local groups such as states, counties, etc., are on the right foot to pass such laws, saying that they're not going to be beholden to unconstitutional interference from outside?
Yeah, this is my campaign platform in action. I mean, I'm not saying that I initiated it here in these cases, but this is exactly what I'm calling for, is that these states and localities, municipalities, etc., can create laws that refuse the imperatives being pushed by international intergovernmental bodies like the UN and the WHO. And, you know, these are violations of the sovereignty of the United States, which it seems willing to abdicate in the case of the Biden administration. They're really willing to sign on. I think they will sign, if they have time, the WHO pandemic treaty, which would mean they wouldn't be legally breaching our sovereignty, but what it means is that they would allow those recommendations to become the mandates of the federal government. And that's the only way to resist them, is through states and localities passing laws that say, or otherwise nullifying federal government laws that are unconstitutional and that have nothing to do with the free and fair existence and of our people. This has nothing to do with our well-being. This has to do with these control freaks trying to get their power all the way down to the local level. Unless they can drive their agenda into the local level, they have no chance. It really has to happen where you live. If they can't make you change your behaviors where you are, they have failed. And that's why we need local government, state government, to resist it.
Could we give you a chance to tell us more about your candidacy as a nominee from the Libertarian Party for President of the United States? One of the things you talked to us in the past about is that even though it's a long shot to be able to compete with the, I will call it the uniparty, the Democrat and Republican powers, the deep state, why it's still important to be in this public arena, to have your voice heard, to get the issues out there, and what the issues are that you're going to be bringing forward as part of this.
Yes, I mean, look, I have no delusions about the prospect of winning. I mean, I have as good a chance of winning the lottery, and I don't play. So I know that it's very, very outside of the bounds of probability. It's very, very unlikely. So what am I doing? What I'm doing is using the presidential campaign platform as a means by which I can spread the news and the views of liberty to the people. And this is what's necessary to do, to tell people how to get their liberty back, to give them some ideas about how they can wrest power from this federal government, resist the power of the federal government, and vest it in themselves at the local level. Ultimately, I believe in self-governance altogether, but I won't go there because some of your listeners may not appreciate it. Many of my fellow candidates for the Libertarian nomination effectively want big government for various purposes, which is very surprising when it comes down to it. They want the government to enforce various equity and diversity issues and mandates and things like this. And so they're not really anti-statist like me. I'm probably the only anti-statist in the race. And as a matter of fact, an interesting development is coming down the pike, and you're getting this news very early. Let's just say it is not in the public domain yet, although there's whisper campaigns within the Libertarian Party that RFK Jr. will seek the nomination of the Libertarian Party, which would be a travesty because he is anything but a libertarian, is a big statist. He thinks that the state is the solution to our problems. It just needs to be commandeered by a more benevolent dictator, whereas I think that the state is the problem itself, especially the federal government. It is the problem. It is outrageously overreaching and immense and oppressive, and it will continue to grow. And RFK Jr. would add layers to this state, what he would deem to be benevolent layers. But every time you add power to the state, you give it more power over you, and this is exactly what he would do. For example, his 3% home mortgage loan to first-time home buyers would create another bureaucracy within the state. It would put the federal government on the hook for billions and billions of dollars, which, of course, we see how that goes. We saw how that went in 2008 with the home mortgage crisis that ended up in the financial crisis, which became a worldwide financial crisis thanks to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So this is like another super Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. This is just another entity. So he has all of these ideas. And then in terms of the environment, he doesn't want to get rid of these regulators like I do. I think regulation is the problem, not the solution. He wants to make them more accountable to the people, whatever that means. But I think it really means that he's a big statist and he wants regulations and he loves regulations. And he blames corporations for everything that goes on, when in fact, if these corporations had no state entities to capture, they wouldn't be capturing them. They wouldn't be controlling them. So this is why this regime of regulation and overtaxation and adding layers to the government, this is why it's a complete failure. It'll be a complete failure and a disaster. Plus, it will add more oppressive elements to the state. And that is just not the way a Libertarian Party should go. And it's very, very much an outside chance. He has about as much shot of winning the Libertarian nomination as I do of winning the presidency, because his ideas are absolutely unlibertarian. He's not a libertarian at all. So he's going to come in and lose, which means I will beat a Kennedy.
One of the principles that you just articulated there is about the temptation. It's a very human one to think about adding more layers of correction over something that's already broken. There's an old saying from when I was a kid and probably way before this: there ought to be a law. There ought to be a law. And whenever I catch myself or my wife saying that, I say, wait, be careful what you ask for. Because as case in point, the tax code, we've been told multiple times as we strive diligently and with complete sincerity to try to navigate through, doing our taxes correctly, that we've been told that not only does no one individual actually understand the entire tax code because of its size and complexity, but that the IRS, as often as not, if you ask them directly for an answer on a particular question, will give you the wrong answer, and that they have language in their bylaws or whatever that says they're not responsible for giving you the wrong answer, that you're still responsible for doing it right, whatever right might be. And it reminds me of a novel that I read in a modern literature class in college by Franz Kafka about a guy who wakes up and finds that he's caught. It's called The Trial. He wakes up and he's being accused of something. He doesn't know what it is. He doesn't know what his accusers are. He doesn't know the rules. He doesn't know how to get a lawyer. He doesn't know if the lawyer's honest. And the whole many hundreds of pages of reading through that nightmare of an experience is his grinding experience of being up against this immeasurably larger foe and that's what many of us feel like, that our lives have become too complicated through designed complexity, layers and layers of designed complexity. We're not even qualified to live our own lives anymore. And I hear that you're wanting to strip away all those layers. You've given us a litany in the past of the 3-letter agencies you would attempt to dismantle should you be in the office, and it certainly brings the issue to the front for discussion. Do you want to remind us of what those agencies are that you think?
Yeah. Well, the IRS is number one. I mean, the IRS would go. I would eliminate the income tax altogether, eliminate the IRS, and then I would go after the intelligence community, eliminating the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, and the whole slew of other ones that, are almost too many to remember. We have so much intelligence or surveillance bureaucracy in this country, it's beyond belief. And of course, I would eliminate the Department of Education. I would eliminate the ATF, which is outrageous. I would eliminate the NSA. All of these organizations would go. These are not necessary, and they're not serving us. They're actually oppressing us. They are actually organs of they're repressive state organs, repressive state apparatuses. They must be dismantled and gotten rid of. They have no function in our society that we need.
I got the reference to that point that we were talking about earlier about states pushing back against international unconstitutional mandates. Louisiana Senate, the Louisiana State Senate, unanimously passed a bill that would end state and local cooperation with rules and mandates that may be imposed by international organizations, including the United Nations, the World Health Organizations. This Senate bill was introduced by Senator Thomas Presley, and there were co-sponsors in introducing the Senate Bill 133 on February 29th. We'll put a link to that in the description of this video. So there is a grassroots pushback at the state and local level against this unconstitutional interference with our lives. Maybe that's a good point to talk about the types of mandates that we've seen, kind of like the elites tipping their hand a little bit over the past 4 years. I know one of the bylaws, the guidelines of the platform that we're speaking to you on does not allow us to contradict these authorities. So, just to say that there are those who would like to not have us be unconstitutionally under the thumb of unelected and non-U.S. organizations. Are there examples that you think are maybe still coming our way if we don't take action that would affect our everyday lives, maybe in some more broad ways than we were already affected with lockdowns, et cetera, over the past few years?
Yeah, well, I mean, the next big the next big crisis that they're going to use, I believe, is climate change. So this climate catastrophism will be implementing, through this climate catastrophism, they will be implementing all kinds of restrictions on the use of fossil fuels, so-called oil, gas, et cetera. And they're already passing laws to eliminate these things, to drive them out of the market altogether. And there also these issues involving climate catastrophism will involve our mobility, our diets. I believe that there will be attempts to restrict our meat consumption, our mobility in terms of automobiles. They're going to try everything, forcing us out of the automobile so-called into a kind of remote control EV skeletal system in which they have an turn off switch, cut off switch for all so-called automobiles, because they will not really strictly be automobiles anymore. They will be in part run by the controllers of this grid. So I think this is part of the reason why they're trying to push us into EVs, because EVs can be controlled much more directly than an automobile, which gives you some auto mobility. They don't want you to have this auto mobility. This is very serious. I think people think that maybe I'm off my rocker here, but I believe I've been right about a lot of things coming down the pike. I said in 2018 in my book, Google Archipelago, that the internet is going to turn into a digital gulag system, a surveillance system, but also a gulag system, and that it is leftist and totalitarian. And now we see all of the evidence of that has come out in recent years. And this is just the next thing. The next thing is this climate catastrophism. They're going to use the climate as a means for control, for attempts to control us.
Michael, for those who want to find out how they can support your candidacy as the Libertarian nominee for President of the United States in 2024, where can they get connected?
Please go to wrecktheregime.com. That's R-E-C, the regime, one word, .com. Get involved. We could also use contributions, frankly. We're running up against a big behemoth of the duopoly, but also just the expenses and difficulties of doing a national campaign. And we'll be running into the convention in May over the Memorial Day weekend. I believe I will, and it looks very clear that I will come out as the nominee. So I would ask you to get behind me, even if you don't intend to vote for me. Why? Because what I'm saying has to be incorporated into the public discourse, and it has to become part of our ethos, that we need to change even the people that will get elected. We need to change their thinking. We need to move them towards liberty-minded thinking and actions. So please support me for that reason alone. I'm not necessarily going to win, but your money will not be ill spent, because it'll put me out in front of millions of people. And that's what I'm asking for.
We've been speaking with Michael Rectenwald. He's a presidential candidate for the United States under the Libertarian Party, and we're glad for your presence always here with us on Liberty and Finance, Michael.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Dunning.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for April 8th through April 15th, 2024, while supplies last. First, we feature 1 ounce 2024 American Silver Eagles at just $5.50 over spot. It's a limited supply, so there's a maximum of 1,500 ounces per order. Next, 1/10 ounce 2024 American Gold Eagles at just $51 over melt. It's also a limited supply, so a maximum of 150 per order. And finally, 90% constitutional silver pre-1965 mixed dimes and quarters at just $2.75 over spot. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.